it's a real struggle for me to think about what I'm going to talk about, what we're going to cover in the short amount of time that we're here. And I got to tell you, it's getting to the last hour. You look up and you go, holy mackerel, look at everything that has taken place, during the weekend. This has been a really special event for me. And the feeling of this place and you people and what we're talking about and the level of acceptance and enthusiasm about the message is just really, it's been really refreshing. I want to thank you guys for having me in here. Now I've got to tell you, this list of emails, it'll come, but it may not come this week. The record is 8 months. One guy in Canada, he goes, I got that 8 months after the conference. And I was like, well, I had to wait till a sponsee pissed me off bad enough that I could make him do the email list. Or if my daughter comes over, I type terribly. But we're going to move into 10 and 11, and we're not going to talk. Everything we've been talking about, though, is about sponsorship. It's about having the experience and then carrying that message. The whole thing, our whole group is about studying the book, looking at what information they're trying to get across, having that experience, and then carrying that message to other people. We're going to talk a little bit about 10 and 11, but, it was interesting. I just want to say, when I was talking to Steve about the wife and about, realizing how selfish he'd been at the house and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I was talking about is, if you think there's no selfishness or self-centeredness in your life, it'd be an interesting exercise to go around to some of the people like your wife and a couple of guys you work with and say, I'm involved in a spiritual exercise where we're looking for manifestations of selfishness and self-centeredness. And I'm really having trouble coming up with anything. Would you be so kind as to make a couple of examples for me? And like Bob says, my buddy from Minnesota, he goes, most of us won't call that meeting, because I don't want to hear it. But it is. But I've seen guys that'll call that meeting where they'll go to the wife and go, you know what? There's some separation between us. I don't feel the level of intimacy that I know that we would like to have, and I'm not sure what it is. But would you be, if it's selfishness and self-centeredness, I'm telling you I'm asleep to it. And would you be willing to point some of it out to me? Could we have those conversations and that sort of thing? They crave that kind of stuff, I mean, golly. It's dangerous stuff, but okay. Talking about 10 and 11. We'll move to the end of the amends process. One of the biggest myths that's come into AA that in the time that I've been around is that the 10th step is an evening review, or that the evening review is 10th step. You hear that all the time. If you were at most meetings, if you said, let's talk about the evening review, and people will go, I'm glad we're talking about the 10th step. Has anybody experienced that? Well, I say it myself. Sometimes I've got a list over here of some forms. This is on some of the stuff that'll come in the email. This is a little form that we use sometime, and even it says 10th and 11th step, evening review. And I was sitting there with my sponsees one time. I said, when I was doing my 10th step evening review, he goes, you just said 10th step here. I said, did I really? It's like I've been hearing it so long in the meetings that even I'm saying that evening review is 10th step. Evening review is clearly in the 11th step, and after you turn the page in the 11th step, it talks about the evening review. So what is the 10th step? It says, here's that one. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. This thought brings us to step 10. I'm not going to have time we got about less than 45 minutes left. I'm not going to get super technical about this. I want to be more experiential with some of this stuff. But the 10th step is one of the most underutilized tools in recovery, 10th and 11th step. I'll never forget when we went to that workshop with Mark, and I was just average AA guy, and he kept talking about living in the spiritual disciplines of steps 10 and 11. And when I'm praying, he'd say stuff like, discipline is the horse I ride. And when I'm living in the strict spiritual disciplines of step 10 and 11, and the disciplines and the disciplines and the disciplines. And I remember sitting there like wanting to go, la, 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 la. I wish you would shut up, because I'm not even in the same area code as the strict spiritual disciplines of step 10 and 11. You know, I mean, for me, on a good day, I'd have a daily reflection book on the back of the toilet or something, you know, and read it, and that was it. Mark brought a little more depth to this stuff for us, and it shows that thought that they'll materialize if I work for them brings me to step 10, which suggests that I continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as I go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. Two things there. One question is, what is this way of living? The other one is, there's a timing mention there, you know. I was talking to a guy the other night, and I said, what step are you on? He goes, I'm on the 9th step. I said, well, really, a lot of us are on the 9th step, but it ought to be 9, 10, 11, and 12. It says we commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. You know, so clearly I don't wait till I'm done with all my amends to start doing the 10th step. Or I could be out here 10 years later looking for Timmy from the 2nd grade so I can finally start, you know, make that last amends and start doing a 10th step, you know. I mean, it's saying we're doing this as we cleaned up the past. Now remember, first step is the problem. 2 and 3 is the solution. 4 through 9 is about removing what's blocking me from the solution. 10 and 11 is staying in the solution. You know, staying in this power, staying in this consciousness of God. I liked it when Christoph was doing the meditation this morning. He talked about being in communion with God. Well, it's funny because talking about old ideas, the word communion triggers a reaction in me that consciousness doesn't. But it's talking about the same thing, about it, you know, being aware of this power and this presence to the point of where it's actually part of the way I roll in the world and the way I react to people and that sort of thing. You know, and so what do we do in the 10th step? It says, we have entered the world of the Spirit. How's that for a promise? You know? We've entered the world of the Spirit. Now it's like I've opened this door and I've entered into the world of the Spirit. My job now is not to back out of that room. You know, it's to actually stay in that world of the Spirit. And it says our next function, you know, interesting one. If you look up function in that old dictionary that we got at the meeting, you know what it says under function? Expected duty. The function of the toaster is what I would expect it to do. You know, you put bread in it and toast. It says our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. I work with that a lot. I work with that in carrying the message. I work with that in sharing in meetings. I work with that in talking to sponsees. Growing in understanding and effectiveness is a big focus phrase for me because I'm always thinking, how could I be more effective? How can I be more understanding? You know, because, you know, very few people, if you go into another group, that very few people are going to respond real well to saying, here's how you're screwing up. You know, it doesn't work that way. You got to figure what would be more understanding and more effective. How would I want to be approached if the tables were turned? If I'm the guy that's asleep and blocked, how could you get that message around my ego to where I might hear it? You know, and it's an interesting piece of the work. But how do we grow in understanding effectiveness? It says this is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Very clear-cut directions in the 10th step. Say, continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. It's interesting. When I'm watching for something, I'm a shooter, but I was not military. If you're in the Army and you've got the enemy out there and you're watching for the enemy, you're on point. You're not sitting in a foxhole playing cards. You're watching for them because you know they're out there and you're seeing them coming. And my job is to watch for them, you know, not wait for them. Watch for 4 things. Selfishness. See if those don't sound a whole lot like the 4th column of that 4-column inventory. Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. I'm watching for those 4 things, and it gives me 4 things to watch for and 4 things to do about it. When these crop up, what's the first thing I do? I've got these numbered in my book. 1, we ask God at once to remove them. Now, we're not telling God to remove them at once. It might be a little presumptive for me to boss around the creator of the universe. It says we ask him at once. It says we ask God at once to remove them. 2, discuss them with someone immediately. See if there's anything in here. The thing about, I can tell you how 10th step got moved into the 11th, into an evening review. The 12 and 12 muddied the water on some of this stuff a little. I'm not against the 12 and 12. It's a good book. There's some good stuff in there, but sometimes the good can stand in the way of the great, and our clear-cut directions come out of the book. And in the 10th step, in the 12 and 12, they talked about inventory, and they talked about all the different forms of inventory. They talk about a spot check inventory as we go through the day. They talk about an evening review at the end of the day, and they talk about the annual house cleaning, which would be like going back and doing a 4-column inventory. But it's easy to get, if somebody's only reading the 12 and 12, they might get confused over what it's saying. So what it's saying to do in the 10th step, there's nothing in this that says anything about waiting until the end of the day. In fact, it's just the opposite. It says we ask God to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately, make amends quickly if I've harmed anyone, and then turn my thoughts to someone I can help. So I'm pissed off. What do? First I talk to God, then I talk to somebody else, then I clean it up, then I think about somebody else, in that order. If I'm pissed off, I go, okay, God, please remove me this feeling. Help me not to believe the delusional lie, whatever it is, and show me how to have some compassion. It's something like that. And then I talk to somebody else, and I could call Bill. I got about a dozen guys that are my running buddies in AA, that if I can't call my sponsor, I'll call Danny Brown, I'll call Bill, I'll call Mike Lorenz. There's a lot of people that I can call that are not going to go, oh, that bitch should have never treated you like that. Because I got to have somebody that's taking me back to the tools of this program, But the funny thing is, one of the things we talked about one night at the table, I had about 14 guys there that night, and I said, I'm pretty proud of myself. I said, I must be one kick-ass AA sponsor, because by my recollection, not one of you guys has experienced selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, or fear in the last 2 weeks. Either that or you're talking to somebody else about it, and they go, no, we're not talking to anybody else about it, So, but I mean, and one guy that I started, I picked up a guy with 35 years that was just crazy as a road lizard, and when we started talking about this 10th step stuff, after we'd done the inventory, he's like, well, if I were to call you every time I'm selfish or resentful or dishonest or afraid, I'd be calling you 35 times a day. So I said, fine. We'll start with 1, though, and there were times when he might call me 4 or 5 times a day. And there's times when we call other guys on the crew. It doesn't always have to be me. But it says talk to somebody else about it. Talk to God about it, talk to somebody. But the thing is, we won't do it. One of the things that hit me like a ton of bricks one day is that I was reading a thing where it said, it's not the great revelation. It's great to study spiritual literature and to do exercises and to learn stuff and to listen to stuff. But it said it's not the great revelation that you haven't had yet that's going to kill you, that's going to cause your downfall. It's the stuff you already know that you're not doing. All right? How come I won't do this stuff? I was sitting with the boys one night at the table, and I said, we like to think of ourselves as a little pocket of enthusiasm, a little group of big book thumpers, if you will. And look how hard it is to get us to work a basic, fundamental AA program. Right? I'm not talking about any advanced stuff. I'm just talking about a basic, what the founders are saying they did. The reason they were getting a 90% success rate is because this is what they were doing. And so, doing inventory, constant thought of others, saying to ourselves many times each day, try saying to yourself one time each day, thy will, not mine, be done. And that's one of those lines that goes back and restates step 3. Saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will, not mine, be done. There's a lot of stuff in the book that restates the deal we've made in step 3. But I was like, look how hard it is to just to get us to work a basic, fundamental AA program. And I see it over and over and over again where a guy gets so pissed off that he's going to quit his job. I had a guy get so pissed off that he fired me as his sponsor. And when we're talking about it, the next time I was around him, I said, did you ever write inventory on this? And this is a guy that was right in the middle of our crew for long enough to know that you don't get to get that pissed off and not write inventory about it, And he's like, no. I was like, how do you make that okay in your brain? The same way I make it okay in my brain, that I don't need to write inventory on this one. Or the other death trap is I go, I don't need to call Myers about this one, because I know what he'll say, if I call him. Even though he never talks about what I thought we were going to talk about. But I'm pretty sure this time I know what he'd say, so I can process this one myself, and so this 10th step, I get 10th steps all the time. I get 10th steps on voicemail. One of the things I tell my guys when I'm sponsoring them, I go, let me tell you something. There's 3 different kinds of messages to leave. Level 1 is, hey, man, it's Billy Joe Jim Bob. We are in Texas. No offense to anybody named Billy Joe Jim Bob, but, hey, it's so-and-so, just calling you, everything's fine, or something like that. That may not even get a return phone call. That's just, he called and Level 2, hey man, give me a call. I got something I need to talk to you about. Whenever it's convenient for you, give me a call. And then level 3 is, hey man, I am wrapped around the axle. As soon as you can, I'd appreciate a phone call. And just like that. The problem is, I'll have a level 3 problem and make a level 1 phone call. Where it's like I got 45 in one hand, a bottle of whiskey in the other, and it's like, hey, it's Charlie, just checking in. Or they'll go, well, I called you, and you're like, I didn't have a message from you. And you're like, well, I didn't leave a message. And you're like, I don't know how to work with that. But I mean, sometimes the guy can leave a 10th step on the voicemail. Hey man, I just want to call. I want to call in a little 10th step here. I'm putting in some job applications. I'm a little scared about it. And there's a part of me that thinks they're going to go back and find my criminal record, and I don't like them looking that far back, and this and that, something like that. Gives me a chance to think about it before I call him back. And then I can call him, I can start thinking about the selfishness, the fear, what's driving him, that sort of thing, the different angle, and that sort of thing. But this 10th step is a really powerful tool in recovery that a whole bunch of us don't really avail ourselves of. I'm guilty of it myself. But I made one yesterday. I called my sponsor from the room yesterday. I do a lot of 10th steps with Katie. If it's not about Katie. There's a part in the amends process where it says we don't get to free ourselves at someone else's expense. I don't get to. It says these parts of our story we save for someone who will understand yet be unaffected. You ever have somebody come up and go? I had a guy come up one time and he goes, "Hey, I need to make an amends to you." He says, "I just talked a lot of smack about you around town, and I'm really sorry." And I'm like, well, I'm glad you feel better. I got to go write inventory now, but I'm like, dude, I didn't need to hear that. If you want to make amends to me, go find the people you were talking smack to. And boy, since we're just scatter shooting, some of the things that we do at the table, some of the topics we have for meetings, we've had whole meetings on sarcasm. man, you talk about a topic for men. I mean, and you talk about when you get a crew of guys where you've got spiritual consent with each other, one of the first things that's got to come off the table is sarcasm, because it is a block to any kind of meaningful conversation, and we don't even know we're doing it. One of my boys walked in the house one day, and he walks through the front door, and he comes back to the table, and I said, brother, you made 3 sarcastic comments between the front door and the table. And you're like, damn. And in sarcasm, there's always a level of truth to it, but it's like if I want to say something to Bill, it's like I kind of come around the back door with him, and then he comes back with a sarcastic response, and neither one of us got to say what we wanted to say. And both of us kind of come away from it unsatisfied, or unmoved. There's a thing where, in that spiritual consent, there's a lot of direct, but it's all done in the with love and understanding and wanting the best for each other. It's not taking shots at each other and that sort of thing. We do a lot of 10-step work with each other, and where we're just, that's one of the beauties of having a crew of guys that are all walking the same path together, is being able to call in a 10-step to so-and-so, and that sort of thing. Where have I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened? When it happens, I go to God with it. I go to somebody else. I make amends quickly if I've harmed anybody. And then I turn my thoughts to somebody I can help. I used to think that meant I got to hop up from my desk and run down to the 24-hour club and sponsor a wet drunk or something. What does it say? It says we turn our thoughts to somebody we can help. Just get me out of self. Right? And I might sometimes I'll meet guys. One of the things is this talk about a burden. Now, if I tell somebody I'll pray for you or I'll pray for your mother or something like that, I have to do it now. I used to just say it because I thought that was a cool thing to say. I'll pray for your son. I wasn't going to go pray for him, but I'd say it, because it sounded like I'm a thoughtful spiritual guy when you say that. Now I do it, but I might pick up somebody this week if they say, my dad's got this, or I've got that, or I'm worried about this, or I got this thing going on with my wife, whatever it is. The next time I'm in a 10-step, when it says turn my thoughts to someone I can help, I'll pray for somebody else. I'll pray, for this person. And whatever it is just get me out of myself for a minute, so that I can be freed of this, whatever this thing is in the 10th step. Does that make sense? It says, and listen to these 10th-step promises. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We are not fighting it. Neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. And I've written in my book right here, is it yours? Is that your experience? That's how I react so long as I keep in fit spiritual condition. That's the greatest gift God can give a drunk like me. That when we talk about being recovered from that hopeless state of mind and body, to go from that hopeless state of mind and body without defense against the first drink to being in a position of neutrality, safe and protected, the problem has been removed. That's big movement. And a lot of times if I'm talking at the treatment center and I do a lot of stuff on step 1, I'll describe the guy on page 24 that is without defense against the first drink. And I'll say, now we get over here on page 63, and we do the 3rd step prayer. Then we go into a body of work, and from the 3rd step prayer to being this guy that's safe and protected is that many pages out of the big book. And that's the stuff we'll run from. That's the stuff we'll avoid. That's the stuff. And a guy will go off and leave the treatment center, and the mental obsession returns, and they get uncomfortable, and they drink again. And do they go, I got to get with one of those big book guys and go through this work? Or do they go, should I go back to treatment? And we always go back to the thing that never has worked, and we won't try the thing that people are saying works every time. So I always tell them, if you've been banging around this deal for a while, get with somebody that's done this work out of the book and say, show me how to do the work out of the book. And if it doesn't work, they're not going to close all the treatment centers, all the crack houses and liquor stores, we'll give it, put you right back where you were if it doesn't work. It's amazing stuff. But it goes on to say, what we really have is a daily reprieve, contingent or conditional on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God. See if this restates the deal we made in step 3. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. What? Try that one for a day. Carry the vision of God's will into all of my activities. Wow. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. See where they're trying to move me to this God consciousness thing? And it says, we can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. And Mark talked about the line a lot. He'd talk about watch. He'd talk about turn. He'd talk about the line. And he'd talk about, I do my morning meditation, and I put my hand on the doorknob, and it's game on. And I get out there, and when I get off the line, I turn back to the line, and I turn back to the line, and I turn back to the line. Because otherwise, by the end of the day, I'm going 2 degrees off, and I don't even know it. And the next day I get up and I start from there, and I don't even know I'm off the line. So these spiritual tools will bring me back to the line. My buddy Danny Brown in Houston, he said one time we were talking, he goes, I think I'm doing pretty good if I can still see the broad highway. It's kind of rough out here, and I'm getting beat up a little bit, but I can still see where it is, And it says, listen to this. Much has already been said about receiving 3 things from God: strength, inspiration, and direction. Pretty powerful stuff. From him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, I like that a lot better than these steps are suggested. It's saying back here, if we have carefully followed direction, we have begun to sense the flow of his Spirit into us. Anybody interested in that? To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. They're saying that God consciousness is like a sixth sense that's vital, that you can't live without your vital organs. It's saying that this vital sixth sense is this God consciousness that we've been talking about throughout the book. But we must go further, and that means more action. Step 11, and we're clearly shifting it. See when step 10 was? It was throughout the day when I get off the beam. We look for 4 things, do 4 things. Step 11 says, yes, prayer and meditation. We can make some definite and valuable suggestions. And then it goes into when we retire at night. The interesting thing about the evening review is if you read it, it's very much like the 10th step. It's basically checking my work of how'd you do in the 10th step throughout the day. It says when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? And did I do the 4 things about it? Do I owe an apology? Have I kept something to myself which should have been discussed with another person? Was I kind and loving towards all? What could I have done better than that? But the difference is now we're going to bring God into it. And it says, or was I thinking of myself most of the time? I can honestly tell you, I've never had but one answer to that. When it says, were you thinking of yourself most of the time? Yeah. Hell, on a good day, it's 20%. But it says, what could I have done better? Was I thinking of what I could do for others? But then it says, but we're careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection. Why? Because that would diminish my usefulness to others. It's all about helping other people. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness. There's a prayer. and we ask and we inquire, which is the same prayer, what corrective measures should be taken. So throughout the day, I'm doing a 10th step. And then at night, I do an evening review where I basically just check my work. How'd you do today out there rolling around in the world? If you showed your ass, did you run it through the process? Or am I just a little juggernaut of self-will out rolling around in the world? Because I was telling my guys, if I don't do evening review, if I'm not doing a 10-step throughout the day, it's like I do my morning exercise and I might as well get up and go, okay, God, see you tonight. And if I'm not doing an evening review, it's like, see you tomorrow. I do my morning exercise and I head out into the world and I don't think about God till tomorrow morning. Hey, this is about a way of keeping it in my consciousness, keeping me connected to this power and conscious of this power. On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead, okay? When we talk about clear-cut directions, we consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking. Katie was talking up in Canada one time, and it's 2,000 people in the room, and she had everybody cracking up laughing. And then she gets to this piece, and she goes, in the 11th step, it says in the morning, we ask God to direct our thinking, and we ask that it be divorced of 3 things. She goes, I'm going to give you a second to ask yourself what those 3 things are. She goes, if you don't know the answer, you're not working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the whole room went flat, and she goes, oh, we're not all laughing now, are we? But we came back from that weekend with Mark, and I swear to God, we had 2 pillows that we would pull out on the floor and sit down on those pillows and open the book to page 86, and we would do exactly what it said. Just like it said. It's worth trying. But it says, on awakening, we think about the 24 hours ahead. Okay? I'm still flat on my back at this point. Right? I consider my plans for the day. Anybody do that when you wake up? I love my buddy Chris Schroeder up in New Jersey. He said whenever he would wake up, his first thought was always, those bastards. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, right? So I'm still flat on my back in the bed. Ask God to direct my thinking. Okay, so on awaken, I think about the 24 hours ahead. What do I got going on today? Okay, so I got to do that one deal. I need to bid that one job. I don't know how much to bid that one for. Okay, I got this big beef going on with the sales tax audit. God, show me how to handle that. And it says we ask God to direct our thinking, right? And then it says before we begin, we ask God to, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity. Isn't it interesting that it names self-pity first? You would think it would say fear or resentment or something like that, but it says self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. The first thing I go to God with in the morning after I've considered my plan is please take my thinking away from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance. For after all, God gave us brains to use. I had one of my guys one time, he goes, it says under these conditions, we can put our brains to work. He goes, I said the prayer. The book says I should be able to use my brains with assurance. I said, those aren't the conditions that we're talking about. That's like the church I grew up in. If you've said the prayer, it should be good. And I said, the conditions aren't that I've said the prayer. The conditions are that I'm freed from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Does that may be a small point, but I can say the prayer and be untouched by it, but it says if I'm in that place of where I'm not in self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives, then I can use my brain with assurance. Here's an interesting line. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of right motives. That word hit me one day. Thought life. Thought life. Isn't that interesting? Because my whole life, the sum total of reality was what went on in here. My thought life was fact, and it was the reality, and it was. I made no accounting for delusion or being driven or anything like that. Eckhart Tolle talks about watching the thinker, and being able to step outside myself and watch my thought life is a level of consciousness that most people don't ever experience. And, watching Charlie operate, standing outside and watching, look what happens when Charlie's scared about money. Look what happens when you hit Charlie with shame. Look what happens when Charlie feels betrayal is a big one for me. Look what happens, when, and I mean, right down the line, and sometimes I work with a little prayer where I just go, God, please help me to not believe the delusional lie. I don't even have to know what the delusion is, because I don't have the power to know what the delusion is. It's a lie that I'm buying. But I work with that prayer a lot. God, help me not to believe the delusional lie. It says, in thinking about our day, it says, we may face indecision. Does that ever happen to anybody? We may not be able to determine which course to take. I've got written right here, restates step 3. Here we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. We relax and take it easy. What? This is a serious problem I'm talking about here. This is a 6-figure amount of money I'm talking about here. I sponsor a doctor, and he was talking one day. He goes, if I have a serious problem and I don't give it the commensurate amount of worry, I'm just being irresponsible. It's like, this is a big problem. I got to worry about it, and it's saying here, we establish these conditions, we come to where we can rely on intuitive thought or decision. There are times when I go, God, please show me how to work this deal out. I'm in the middle of a sales tax audit right now, and it's a 6-figure problem. I can't even tell you how little I've been affected by it. It's the weirdest thing. I mean, when the letter came, I thought about Sandy Beach, saying, God, this is not going to affect our relationship. We are going to get through this sales tax audit, and they're going to give me a number to write a check for, and I'm going to write a check for that amount, and I'm not going to go to the friggin' moon every time I get a letter from them. It is so different from any other situation like this I've ever been involved with, and it ain't my power doing it. It says, ask God for inspiration, intuitive thought, or decision. Relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. We're often surprised after how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. Practice, practice, practice. Doing this process over and over and over again. What used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. It says being still in experience, it's not likely I'm going to be inspired at all times. We might pay, but nevertheless, here's a promise. We find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. It's heavy stuff. And it goes on to say we usually conclude the period of meditation with the prayer. It's interesting. Mark said that one time. He goes, it says we usually conclude this period of meditation. He said, which implies that we've meditated. And I said, no. What it implies is that what we just did is meditation. If you get that 1936 dictionary out, now it's fine if you want to do alms and silent meditation, that sort of thing, but do it along with this exercise, because I got out that 1936 dictionary and I looked up meditation. Meditation is a word that has really changed between the mid-30s and now. In the 60s, we had Ram Dass and Ravi Shankar and some of those guys coming in, and meditation came to be, silent and quiet. But if you look up in the old dictionary, it says to think abstractly, deep thought, that sort of thing. And it talks about in how a general meditates a battle. How a general, if he's getting ready to go into a battle in the battlefield, will think, okay, all right, we're going to have our forces here, and we're going to go in like this, and we're going to send one squad out this way so we don't get flanked. And if they start to go, and he's considering his plans for the battle. It says as a general meditates a battle. I'll never forget that one. And that's the same thing I'm doing with my day. Is upon awakening, I'm thinking, what's going to happen today? What do I got going on? What am I going to do if it goes this way? I don't know what to do about this one thing. God, please give me an intuitive thought, or something happens like that. Take my thinking away from self-pity, dishonest, self-seeking motives. I mean, this is stuff that can just become automatic as a part of waking up. And then I like to do silent meditation. I like to go read spiritual literature and do some quiet time and that sort of thing. But isn't it funny how quickly we'll set down this little toolkit right here, Try making this a piece of your day and see how it goes. We usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer. What are we going to pray for? That I be shown through the day what my next step is to be. That's a pretty good one. God, please show me through the day what my next step is to be. God, please give me whatever I need to take care of such problems. I looked up such, and it said, as mentioned before, as previously mentioned. So the problems that I was considering over here that I don't know what to do about, I'm asking God here to show me, give me what I need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom of self-will. Here we're restating the deal again. And we're careful to make no request for ourselves only. Many of us have waited, anyway, and then it talks about the things we take into it. And then there's another piece of the 11th step that's during the day. I call this PARS. I made a little acronym out of this. It says PARS. As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful. Ask for the right thought or action. Constantly remind ourselves we're no longer running the show. Saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will, not mine, be done. How about a couple of times each day? Pause. Ask, remind, say. I was talking to Danny one morning, and I talk to Danny a lot, and he goes, it's funny. He says we pause when agitated or doubtful. And I said, yeah. He goes, I know when I'm agitated. I said, yeah. And he goes, I'm almost never doubtful. It's like I always say, I'm often wrong, but never in doubt. But pause when agitated or doubtful. Now, the thing about it is, that pause is a promise. You can't take a brand new guy that hadn't been through this process and say, Ian, we want you to pause when you're agitated or doubtful. It ain't coming. It's like telling me acceptance is the key. If I'm blocked, that pause ain't coming. That pause is a byproduct of being engaged in this process and being unblocked and being connected with this power. And then I'll have the capacity to be able to pause. If I'm blocked, it's ready, fire, aim. That's one of Danny's lines. We constantly remind ourselves we're no longer running the show. Thy will be done. We are in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We don't tire so easily, for we're not burning up energy like we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. It's the same thing we talked about in this third step. It works. It really does. It's a practical approach. It's interesting. If you go back to page 62, it says we had to quit playing God. Why? It didn't work. You get over here and it's saying, it works. It really does. No bull. Try it. I mean, it's a very practical approach to spirituality. One of the things that I don't want to forget to talk about is the circle and triangle check-in. We've been stamping our books all weekend with the circle and triangle. And one of the things that I do with my guys as a spiritual exercise and as a way of checking in is a lot of times when a guy calls me on the phone, I'll say, where are you at with the circle and triangle? Sometimes on Thursday night when we're sitting around the table, I'll say, let's go around the table and do a circle and triangle check-in. And the way that works is those three sides of the triangle make up the three legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous: unity, service, recovery. For a long time, I was only in one side of the triangle, just going to meetings. So I'm only doing one side of the triangle, but I was kind of hoping for the results of all three, right? a circle and triangle check-in goes something like, well, I go, where are you at with the circle and triangle? And I go, well, it's the unity. That's the fellowship. I went to 4 meetings this weekend. I was with the guys up in Santa Barbara this weekend, and I went over, to the coffee after the meeting, and I've done this much, in the fellowship. Service, made the coffee at this meeting. I'm sponsoring this many guys, carrying a meeting out to so-and-so on Mondays, or something like that. And recovery, let's see, the steps, have not made any approaches this week. I've probably done 4 evening reviews and 5 honor awakenings, and I haven't done any 10th steps this week. And, and you can get a pretty good beat on where a guy's at in a pretty short amount of time by doing the circle and triangle check-in. That's why I like having it in the book, and I like for a guy to be aware of what our 3 legacies are: unity, service, and recovery, and that sort of thing. In closing, I want to talk about a little bit about what we talked about earlier, about how hard it is to get one of us just to work a basic, fundamental AA program. Give some thought to this self-piece. Give some thought to what would I do differently when I'm calling my sponsor, when a sponsor is calling me, and what can I go to my sponsor with? One of the big mistakes I made one time when I realized that my sponsor wasn't doing it the way I thought it needed to be done, or I started hearing things that my sponsor was, it never occurred to me to go back to him and that there might be a chance that he'd be as eager to look at this stuff as I was. I judged him for not knowing it. I always say I have a terrible habit of judging somebody really harshly for not knowing something that I learned about 30 minutes ago. What would I go to him and if I said, what if we started looking at this self-piece? What if we started doing 10th steps where we're taking it to that? Because one of the traps I fall into, if I'm not taking it to his part at an entirely different angle, and where'd you set the ball rolling, and where'd you make decisions based on self and that sort of thing, if I'm not careful, I'll start trying to manage for him. He calls me with a problem, and I start trying to manage for him. And I start trying to tell him, well, maybe, you could spend a little less money here, or you could do this and that. When you're taking it to this stuff, all I'm doing is trying to remove what's blocking him from the power and pointing out where. And because there's times I go, do you really want Charlie Parker to be your relationship sponsor? For God's sake, I don't know what job you should take, but I know how to get you connected to the power, and I guarantee you God knows what job you ought to take. All you got to do is get in this work and do this stuff, and God will intuitively show you who to date, what job to take, what to do about this situation. It's way bigger than anything I'm going to be able to tell you, and it also makes it where I can sponsor a lot more guys because I'm not being their life coach. We're not having these super long conversations about stuff, and then it's manifestations of self. You're looking at this stuff, what's driving you, and where do you need to make amends, and how could you look at this stuff differently? The thing I'll say in closing, I don't know if this is your experience, but my experience a lot of times is if I'll go to an event like this, and I'll get right up next to the solution. I'm not doing too good. I need to go to a conference like this. And I go and I get around people that are doing the deal, and I hear people talking about doing the deal, and I get right up next to the solution. And then I go home. And I fall back into my life. And the next thing you know, it's the wife, and it's the job, and it's the kids, and it's the stuff like this. And next thing you know, I'm meaning to write that inventory. Or I should look more into that 10th step stuff. Get in there and have this experience. If you'd have come to me when I had 17 years and said, Charlie, what's going to change your life and set you on fire is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous right out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have told you you're crazy. Because I've been doing AA for a long time, and I know what it offers me. And I'm telling you, I had never stuck a toe in the water. Taking this deal to another level. And next thing you know, people are coming up to you after the meeting going, hey, man, could I get your phone number? You're like, yeah, and they're like, I'm dying over here, and being able to say, do you have a big book? Having a message of depth and weight and being able to tell that guy, Yeah, yeah. I can tell you, I can show you exactly what I did. Do you have a big book? If not, we'll get you one. And let's go sit down over here and write some inventory. Or let's go down here and talk about the problem. Let's talk about the solution. It's amazing stuff to get to be a part of and to be able to transmit this process to somebody else. One of the most magical things that happens at Primary Purpose Group is you see a guy come in tore up and beat up, and next thing you know, 3 months later, you look over and he's got his book out and he's got his new guy, and he's sitting there. God dang it. He's sitting there telling this guy what he did. And then, next thing you know, you look over and that guy's got his new guy, and they're sitting eating with this stuff. I almost missed it. If I'd have died in that plane crash, I would have missed the whole friggin' deal. I love the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I really love anybody that'll sit here and talk about this stuff all week. And I can't thank you guys enough for having me out here this week again. I've had a great time, and I'll be happy to hear from anybody down the road. And, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it.